Hi, this is Peter Teuscher. I'm here with Tobi Dempker. Thanks for joining us for another podcast where we like to have an open discussion about things that can help you in your personal development, in your professional development, and then sometimes we throw in a little bit of philosophy, and really with the purpose of just picking a topic and seeing where the conversation takes us and hoping it's a conversation that can add value to anyone listening. So how are you doing today, Tobi?
Good, thank you. I'm in a good space. I'm ready to dive into whatever you have at hand for us today.
Okay, well, yeah, good. Well, I've picked a topic for today, and basically, anybody I coach, like any successful people that I coach or people I've met who are really successful, they all kind of have things that they attribute to their success, the reason why they were successful. And I like to refer to this as their ingredients for success. And I have my own, and we'll talk about them today. But it's interesting to think about what are the key things that you need that will make you successful, or if you've been successful in the past, what was it that made that success happen, that allowed you to be successful. And I think that's really where I'd like to talk. Those are the things I'd like to talk about today in terms of what I consider my ingredients to success, what you consider yours, and maybe some of the things that other leaders or other people who are really successful have pointed out as what they value in terms of contributions to success. So what do you think?
Well, the first thing I start thinking about is, well, how do you define success? Because that's
Exactly.
very, very
I was hoping you would go there, because you're right. Obviously, the ingredients. If you're gonna cook something or bake something, the ingredients depend on what you're trying to create. And it's interesting. I've asked this question, when it was appropriate to people. And I've had a wide variety of definitions of what success means. Some person one person years ago said to me, yeah, happiness. That's my definition of success. If I'm happy, if I find happiness in all areas of my life, that's success. What about you? Do you have a definition of success?
Not really. For me, it's more of a theme. It's about maybe similar to what your friend said, but it's about balance. Balance, but I can go in quite deep on this. We've been talking about the wheel of life, for instance, to have a balance in that wheel, so it makes things tick. I enjoy balance in all sorts of way, and how much I get into something, how much I dive in or sort of consume or get into something. But then if it becomes too much, then I don't enjoy it anymore. So it's about finding that level of things as well. And I'm a person who enjoys lots and lots of different things. So there needs to be a balance and a wide sort of variety of things. So yeah, for me, it's a theme of balance. That's how it suits me. But I really agree, and I think it's really interesting to see what fits for you. I think that our first conversation was about purpose. And a few times ago we talked about Covey's seven habits of successful people, and there's about what is your purpose? What's your sort of mission that you want to achieve? So I guess with that said, it's just for me to find out what makes sense to you. What do you want to achieve with things? But be really sure that this is your, and not being inspired by others, because it's really easy, of course, to be inspired and perhaps attached to other people's definitions of success.
Yeah, I think seeking inspiration from others can be a good thing, as long as you don't let it influence or talk you into what you need to do in order to feel successful. Because I can tell you my definition of success is achieving my own highest potential. So that doesn't mean it's restricted to one area of life. Being as good as I possibly can be in relationships, being as good as I can be in the work that I do, in terms of, and I measure that purely on how I add value. And, the things that I feel that I can offer something to other people, if I can do that to the best of my ability. Like, I like to write, so I continually work on improving my ability to write and communicate my ideas and hopefully add value to that way. So for me, it's generally achieving my highest potential. And sometimes it's, my ability to communicate. Sometimes it's my ability to help others. I think we all feel good when we can contribute to someone else. But then even going within, I'm a big proponent of meditation, and am I pursuing that as deeply as possible? There's a spiritual side to my life. Am I pursuing that as best as I can? And so achieving my own potential, I think, is really that's how I define success. Am I, is all about that. Recognizing how much potential that I think I have, or where my strengths are, and am I achieving those? And so that's how I judge and assess my own success. And a lot of people, when you talk about success, it's all there's so many people that measure success on financial rewards or accolades in a certain field of work. Whether it's in business, it tends to be very financially driven, or have you built a business, and or it can be in academics, the different things that you studied, and papers you've written, and discoveries you've maybe made in the scientific world. So we all have different ways of looking at it, but I think, as you said, balance is important, and that's why when I look at it in terms of potential, my potential is not limited to what I do for a living, right? My potential to serve others, my potential to, I'm living in a family life now, which was a bit of a change, and being the best I can in that role as well. So yeah, those are all things that I think I kind of all feed into my idea of what success means. So, but it's a really important point to, obviously, if you're going to talk about ingredients for success, to know what your definition of that is.
Yeah, and really to give it some thought, and as you said, to add in these different kind of perspectives, because I think it's very common if we talk about success in a certain setting. For instance, when I do workshops, that could be potentially be one of the topics that we talk about, to get to know each other better. Like, okay, so what if we want to get to know each other better as a group, then one question might be, well, I would like to know how people define success for themselves. And it's really interesting because you get a really wide range of answers. But still, it's really easy that you listen to others like, yeah, that's right, I should say that, So you're affected by others, and you're also thinking in the context of your work or as a leader, or whatever purpose that the setting has. So have that really holistic view of, well, success in life or in business or family or whatever it is. So be really clear on that. And then it's so easy that you start comparing with others. And I had a really interesting discussion with someone I ran into the other day about, if everybody's getting, if everybody around you is sort of accelerating, or they're developing or getting perhaps better material status in a lot of ways, and your life is also becoming better, but not at the same pace of others, how will that make you sort of happy or unhappy? Because you're getting it better, but not if you compare it to the pace that others are developing it, right? So that's also a really big factor. What does it look like around you? Because even though we are accelerating and it's getting better for us, we might not see that if we're just looking at what other people are having. Yeah. And from a globalization point of view, that's one kind of issue that a lot of people are dealing with, or it's a big concern.
Absolutely, because poverty is declining in the world. Like, if you look at the last 100 years, but it's now they look at relative poverty. So because if you think about 200 years ago, nobody had a refrigerator, or a lot of the amenities that we take for granted. But now people who struggle to have enough food to eat may have the television. They may have a lot of things that poor people didn't used to have. But so yeah, there is a lot of relative poverty, and I think your other point was interesting, and it reminds me of when in a business setting or at a workshop, when you go around the room, and there are always going to be people who think about what would be a good thing to say, what would sound good, instead of really sharing their authentic thoughts, they think, this is going to sound good if I say it, and which is kind of too bad, because it's about having a trusting environment and sharing, your authentic thoughts. So. Yeah.
And also that it's really difficult, if you haven't thought about this.
Exactly.
It's not something that you can just make up on. It takes a lot of, I think, reflection and just thinking about and visualizing and a lot about your life philosophy. Though there's so many components, and I guess that's maybe that's related to the ingredients that you were talking about.
Yeah, absolutely. And the same thing happens when you ask people, who's a leader that they admire, for example. I years ago I did an assessment center, and had all these applicants, and one of the questions was to speak about someone that you admire and tell them why. And I had the same question even years prior to that, and I said, actually, one person I really admire, Jim Carrey, Canadian comedian, right? And and I said, the reason that I admire him is because there's a story. He comes from poverty, and he tells the story about how he came to LA and he started to have his first bit of success, and he went up to the Hollywood Hills and he wrote himself a check for $10 million for a movie. And then he was on some late night show, and he brought out the check and he said, "See the power of visualization." And but if you look at him now, I don't think it was really about the money. It was about the power to visualize something you want. And I think for him, maybe it might have been those early days something about money is related to success or equals success. But you listen to him now, and he's, he talks about other values, and he it's funny. I've heard him say, I wish all of you were as successful as me, so you realize it doesn't mean anything. You would wish you wouldn't have it sometimes. So, so it's funny, the things that we aspire to sometimes, or these ideas we have about success. Once we achieve it, we realize actually it's not what we wanted at all. And I think especially when you look at people who aspire to be, I want to be an influencer, or I want to, I want to be a YouTube star, and all these things related to popularity and recognition, external recognition. And then once we have it, it becomes very cumbersome. But yeah, I think, but I said that, and my reason wasn't because he found a way to make, $10 million for a movie. That his ability to focus on something, visualize it, and realize it for himself, even if he'd written something else describing his perfect life rather than a check, it would have been the way he was able to so accurately predict by his focus, his visualization, and then putting all his effort and action towards achieving that goal. That's the whole process that I really admired. And so yeah, it's interesting when you hear people talk about the people that they admire. One person said, and I can't remember now the name of the guy who owns Ryanair, the discount airline here in Europe, and obviously an Irish guy because it's an Irish company, but they admire him. But he's a guy who, I don't know if that's clearly one where you optimize your business and it's all about profits look, I don't know how the company operates or how well the employees are treated or anything like that, but I think clearly the emphasis is on maximizing profit and minimizing costs in every way, right? So, and usually companies that have that philosophy don't pay their employees; they pay them as little as they possibly can, and so on. So, I'm jumping to conclusions about that, but I'm just saying to admire someone whose key focus are those metrics. It really, that doesn't align with my values.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, no, I think in general, when we when we talk about admiring others, we think about people that we don't really know, and we admire
yeah,
certain aspects of that what we can see, but we
exactly.
have no idea what lies behind them, what the story is. So that's just we're admiring a portion of, or perhaps an image of a person. It might be authentic, but you never know, really.
Yeah, and it might be that person doesn't really, those aren't the values they live by. We're just attributing certain characteristics to them. So, again, and just like I'm making assumptions, you never really know. But, there are leaders that I really admire. And we've talked about this before. I so often, someone who's really popular or big in industry, like Elon Musk is just such a he's such a brand unto himself. He's a bit of an enigma, and when people say, in terms of leadership, they'll name him as a leader, and I'm like, well, you realize he thinks that you should work 80-hour weeks, and you devote your whole life to the work that you do, and that goes totally against your ingredients for success, in terms of, or your definition of success in terms of finding balance, right? So mine too, because I think, I can work really hard at something, but I don't know if it's necessarily a good thing to be so immersed in it that everything else, takes a second or third role in my life. So, yeah. So anyway, I think in terms of defining success, absolutely right. I think it's a really important piece of the discussion before you can even get to the ingredients. And and I agree. It's not something where, well, I just want to have some, that sounds good. If I were going to tell someone about my definition of success, what would sound good is not really the right motivator for for describing what success means to you. So, good. Well, look, in terms of ingredients, in terms of those things, because when I think about anything that you want to achieve in life, one good question to ask yourself is, what ingredients do I need? What behaviors do I need? What kind of new habits do I need to develop? If I'm gonna, you're a guy who does a lot of athletic training. So, if you're gonna run a marathon, or you're gonna do a triathlon, or you're gonna do any of these things, and you've clearly already developed some of those habits that you need in order to do that. But if someone were going to try and learn a new skill or do something that they haven't done, or maybe they've only done related things, right? So you need to develop new skills and habits. So I look at these ingredients for success the same sort of way. These are things you continue to do, or these are attributes that you continue to develop in yourself in order to achieve this goal, or to consistently achieve certain goals. So yeah, I've got 5 core ingredients. And we can talk through them. And then I don't know if you've thought about any core ingredients that you have, but I think that might be a nice basis for what other people. I can even throw in some other things that I know other people have shared with me. But anyway, I'll go through my list and I'll describe them in a little bit of detail. So the first one is one we've done a podcast about, and it's curiosity. And I think the reason, I think any kind of problem solving is related to some degree of creativity, but also I think when people set themselves goals that are meant to make them successful, or are meant to fulfill their success, and they are goals that are very standardized and laid out for them, doesn't challenge their imagination in any way, I don't know if you're necessarily going to follow your own path. So I think curiosity is really important. And I remember reading a Stephen King quote. He's written so many books. He's
Yeah.
tons of volume, but obviously also some very good ones. And he said, his stories usually start with the question, what if? What if this happened? And that kind of embodies for me this whole approaching life with curiosity. He approaches his stories with curiosity. And I think when you look at the way we learn in life, kids are so curious, right? And that's what helps them learn and explore new things. And I think curiosity creates diversity in our lives because we look at different things. And I think I had a workshop this week, and one of the participants was saying, I'm here because I'm really curious about people and their motivations, and curious about about myself and the things that bring me to the behaviors that I have and so on. So I think that curiosity is a really important thing to have if you want to be successful, because if you're just being driven again by this this one way of doing things, or you've seen other people be successful and you want to follow that same path, there's no curiosity in that. There's no aspiring to do something a little different, or plod your own path in life. And so that's why curiosity, I think, is important for my definition of success, because I think, for me, achieving my own potential, there's areas I don't know where I have potential unless I'm curious about that, about expanding, and unless I'm curious about it, I won't fully, achieve what my definition of success. The next one that I think is a really important ingredient is desire. This to find things that you really have a desire to achieve, or find things that you have a real desire to experience, not just a means to an end, right? I'm doing these things because people will aspire to be wealthy or famous or whatever, but is that really where their desire is? Is that the real desire they have? And I mean desire really in a positive way, that in the way that we desire peace, or we desire, harmony, and so this real drive in us to fulfill the things we're trying to get. The third one I have on my list for ingredients is an open mind, and this ties very closely into curiosity. Because I think the where I've gotten myself in trouble and where I've gotten away from success has been when I think I know the exact path to where I'm trying to go, and when I get signals or I get advice or whatever that could help me, and I go, no, I know exactly where I'm going. I think when I lose the open-mindedness in terms of how can I achieve my success? There are many roads that paths that lead up the mountain, right? And when you forget that, and you become too narrow in your perspective, I think that's detrimental. Certainly in terms of how I define success. The fourth one is determination, and I've talked before about how I don't really believe in. I don't believe in discipline. The word itself conjures a lot of negatives in me. It conjures punishment. It conjures restrictive behavior. It conjures a lot of negative things. However, I do believe in determination, and I believe in willpower. I just don't believe in discipline. So when people talk about, are you disciplined? Or even people have said to me, wow, you're so disciplined, whether it's dietary things or whatever. And I think, no, I've just developed a habit. I don't even think about it. I just do it. It's not discipline, right? But I can get very determined, if it's important to me. And I think if you're quick to give up, or you're quick to doubt yourself. And look, I've got a very strong inner critic, but I still find when I find my determination, I can do almost anything, right?
Mm.
And so, and then the final one, and this relates to our first podcast that we did together, but it's clarity of purpose. And I think that I think clarity of, when you're clear about the why, and Simon Sinek talks about this. He wrote a book about it, and I find more and more when I work with people in organizations or whatever, or individual coaching, when they have a clear sense of purpose, everything falls in line, or everything becomes much clearer for them. So I think a clarity of purpose is something that's super important for success, depending on how you define it, right? But I think those are, and these will be 5 things that maybe aren't on anyone else's list, but these are what I attribute to my success. And if I can go back to the first one about curiosity, I think I'd like to add, the adjective healthy. I think healthy curiosity is really important, because the kind of curiosity that's, I'm gonna try this illicit drug because I wonder what that'd be like, or I'm gonna try this dangerous thing. I don't think that's healthy curiosity, right? I think just trying something different for the sake of trying something different isn't the right reason. And even some of the things that I've done, therapies I've tried, and so on, that can be, that can be very challenging, and I think just to do those out of curiosity, I don't think is the right reason or motivation. So those are my 5: health, curiosity, desire, an open mind, determination, and clarity of purpose. Those are my 5 ingredients to success.
Very interesting. Yeah. So then, how have you sort of come to the conclusion that this is for sort of your formula or your recipe, if we want to talk about ingredients?
Yeah, it's similar to when I tell people about how I really believe in intuition and developing your intuition, and I look at when I've made choices that led me to outcomes I wasn't happy with. I usually had some kind of a nudge or some kind of an intuition to do something differently. And so I look back, and in hindsight, that's easy to do. And so I take the same approach. I think, when I did things I was really happy with, and that really brought me to closer to my potential, something like, having the curiosity to do a certain thing often allowed me to branch out in a whole new area that I didn't know I had a skill or ability to do well. And so any of those things, when I look back on, the things that led me to make the decisions, but also stick to them, those are the things that are on my list. So it's about choice making, and it's about sticking to those choices and believing in those choices. And I think all of these things really help me to do those 2 things.
Yeah, cool. That's great. Because I'm thinking, there are so many books on. We talked about 7 Habits of Successful People, for instance, and there's a lot of books and a lot of theories and assessments of what makes you successful, or what comes in the way in terms of personal development and leadership. And it's so difficult to validate all of this, because it depends on context, it depends on your definitions, and it depends. I mean, I'm thinking of these 5 elements that you have. And if we would change one, would the result be different? I mean, if we had you as a research project, okay, let's see how close Peter can get to his potential. If we put in something else instead of desire, how would that change this? So what I mean is that I think when we talk about the ingredients of success, it's really important also to see, well, how does it connect to you, and how is this important for you? Because I might have a few other things that I could bring in. I might have something here that I don't want to have.
Yep.
I mean, I agree with almost all of it to I would say not 95%. I really I like I enjoy your way of thinking of around this. Um, but when it comes to, I guess what my question would be, how can we or how can we think about a formula that fits to you, right? And I guess it goes back to where we all started. So what is it that you want? What what do you value? Do you value curiosity? Is something that's something that really can bring value to your definition of success or to your life? And I would think in most cases, yes, it is. Well, okay, then that could be something to work with.
Mm.
But also to maybe, and this is maybe as a coach to think about and to dig a little bit here. So if you're coaching someone, to think about, oh, what would be your ingredients? You know, what do you value? What do you think can bring you closer to your success or to your long term goals, etc. Right? Mm-hmm.
Well, yeah, I think values definitely play a role, and like I say, I don't think this is the list for everyone, and it's certainly not an exhaustive list. There are other things that contribute to my success, things that I do unconsciously, and so on. But I think if I leave any of these things out, that's when I don't. That's when I don't think it leads me to where I want to go. So if I stop being curious, then I think I'll get off track. If I lose my desire, then I just start doing things that I should do. I do things out of obligation, and I'm not pursuing my desire, at least the way I define it. And again, if I'm not open-minded to other possibilities, then I get very, very set in my ways, and I start to do the same things over and over, and I think that puts you in a comfort zone that I don't think gets me to my highest potential, right? And certainly if I get rid of if I lose my determination, then and get easily discouraged, then it's going to be hard for me to pursue the things I want to do.
Sure.
And we know from our discussion around motivation, right? Purpose is one of the three core pillars of motivation, according to Dan Pink. But also, I fully agree with that one. So yeah, I think there are plenty of other things that I think will contribute to my success. They're the habits that I've developed, the skills that I've learned. My experience as a whole helps to bring me closer to those things. But I think if I left off one of these 5 core things, I think my success, at least the way I define it, would be limited, or wouldn't be as I wouldn't be able to achieve it the same way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's inspiring. It's really interesting to see how you've developed sort of this formula for yourself. And I think for me or anyone else who listens to this, I mean, it becomes clear that you've thought a lot about it. You have a very structured kind of way of thinking about how you want to structure your life. What do you want to focus on? What helps you? What brings you on the path that you're determined to pursue? That you have a desire for, obviously, to use sort of your ingredients.
Well, they're good reminders, though. They're good reminders, and I think. Sorry if I just want to add, though, they're less about. The ingredients are similar to, when we talk about agility, they're principles, they're not rules, and I think I try and get away from these are the rules that you need to follow to be success. Stephen Covey talks about habits. They're habits you develop, and I agree with those. But someone like, there's a Canadian psychologist, Jordan Peterson. He's a very controversial figure. There's plenty of things I disagree with him on, but I still respect his work. But he's got a book and wrote a follow-up book, 12 Rules to Life, and then he wrote another 12 rules or something like that. And to be fair, I haven't read either of his books. I just, I read books that I'm drawn to, and I'm just not drawn to those. But I know they've helped tons of people. But because for me, rules don't work in complex systems. We both know that, right? If you buy into systems thinking, rules are for a complicated situation. Rules are great. Follow these steps. But I think for complex situations, and look, human relationships, human being are we live in a whole lot of complex systems, and to approach those, you need principles and not rules. And so that's just that's my philosophy, and could be wrong, but it works for me. So I just wanted to clarify it's not about having a set of rules. It's really, these are some principles that I live by. Sorry, now you can go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's great. But I think that's really important, and I think we might have talked about that at some previous occasion as well. How rigid are you with things, right? Sometimes to give it, for some reason in my social media, a lot of these memes have come up and talk about, if you don't want to do something, then you should do it, and you have to do certain things. It's like really rigid kind of messages, and I'm freaking out a little bit when I'm seeing because there's no space for other interpretations or for other thoughts or ideas. So, I mean, and you talked about discipline. I think discipline can be a fantastic thing, or determination to do something. But if for a certain reason something else becomes more important than what I set out to do at this particular moment, then I can take another choice, and I can be a bit flexible. We talked about agility last time.
Yeah. And I think
as long as I have my long-term objective, or and I think this is really relevant to this topic as well. When we're talking about success, I mean, we're not talking about success, something that we can achieve maybe today or tomorrow. This is a very long-term objective, and it might not even be definable in that sense. It's more of giving you a sense of direction. Well, this is what I aspire to. Like if I challenge your definition a little bit, your highest potential. Well, how do you know your highest potential? You're probably never going to know your highest potential, right?
No.
But you aspire to get close to it, at least to get to an area where you're getting closer to that.
Well, that's like spiritual people who want to get enlightened, or I don't know that any of us will ever achieve enlightenment, or very, very few, but and it's that sort of thing. It's every step that I take closer, but that's why it's achieving my own highest potential is a lifelong, and if I don't reach it, my efforts to get there will still be worth it, right? But it needs to it's just like when companies have a vision for themselves. They'll have goals, but the vision may never be achievable. But it's something that you work towards, and in the attempt to achieve it, you become a better person, or you achieve the success you were hoping for. Just like in martial arts, they talk about when you're trying to strike a target, you're looking beyond the target, so that when you hit the target, you're at your full force. And it's the same sort of thing. You're shooting way beyond, and then in some cases, if you get halfway there, you can call it a success. So yeah, it's not clearly defined, and it's not a goal. Like if it was a goal, I'd want to make it measurable. Whereas for me, it's a definition of of my principles of how I want to live, right? And so look, words are limited. You only point you in a certain direction, right? They have a certain degree of ambiguity. So, we're talking around things, but I still think words are important. That's why, for me, discipline is negatively loaded, but for other people it works really well. And so, I don't want to discourage that. But for me, that's why these things are so important. And to your other point, they complement each other. When I think about determination, but if I get so determined that I'm not willing to look at any other options, that's why being open-minded and determined the two will complement each other, right?
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
the desire and the curiosity and like all of it. I may develop a desire to pursue something, but it doesn't fit with I'm so clear. I'm clear about my purpose. So I realize, wow, this desire is going to take me away from that, right? So they're all complement each other. And that's why I find it helps me to at least define these five. And if there are other things in certain situations that I know will help me be successful, and there certainly are, but these are these are the things that, and it's just like when you ask someone to, to define their core values, you have a lot more than just your 5 core values, but identifying 5 core values has a benefit, right?
Yeah. Yeah, sure. Yeah, finding the core to say how large is, yeah. No, super interesting. And also what I thought about there was the I guess there's a hidden message here about being able to enjoy the ride. Like if we're striving for success all the time, and it's something that we see in front of us in the far future, and the way there is going to be very just full of pain and misery. It doesn't really mean very much, right? So how can you make that journey appealable? I guess that this is something, and that goes into your desire. Perhaps is this something that you desire to do, that you enjoy doing? Although it takes an effort and might be painful at time, but most of the time, is this something that you enjoy?
Well, and a lot of times the pain and the challenge is what makes it really fulfilling. Being able to overcome those things, and it strengthens you, and it makes you feel like a sense of accomplishment. I mean, how accomplished would you feel if you could, you're a guy who's run marathons, so. How challenging is it for you to run 10K, right? I mean, maybe 10K in the sand or something like that.
It depends on how fast you want to run it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, sure.
So it's the challenges we have are great, and I think and who knows, maybe for some people their definition of success is to work as little as possible with as little effort in life as possible. I'm not going to judge anybody's definition of success. I would, knowing what we know about, getting into the flow state and how that contributes to not only a successful but a happy life. I would question whether doing as little as possible really contributes to happiness. But that's just my perspective, right? So
yeah. And also, one other thing that I just thought about is kind of perspectives and your expectations on things. For instance, one thing that I thought about, I talked about someone about this a while ago, and it's about relationships. So if you imagine like. With my wife, I'm not going to give you an exact number here, but imagine that I would say that I love her 100%.
Yeah.
That is not true. There are certain things about her that I maybe don't agree on, or everybody has their personal flaws. So what's a number that would fit to you? And this is just out of the blue, so this is not related to my wife, but somebody asked.
You might get yourself in trouble here. Yeah. Does she listen to the program?
We'll see. This is how we figure out. No, but someone asked someone else, like, well, do you love your wife 80%? It's like, yeah, sure, yeah. So, well, 80%, that's a lot, right? Yeah, I guess it is. So, and think about what are your expectations, and then if in terms of relationship, do you want to have a successful relationship? Yeah, well, can you accept the 20% of your spouse that you don't love, and how do you manage that? Yeah, I guess that's okay. It's about expectations, but realizing that I love this person to 80%, and I enjoy being with this person to 80%. Everybody has some flaws, so yeah, I can manage that. And perhaps my definition of success is just to enjoy that 80% and to manage those 20% in a way that is functioning for both of us, or finding a balance. Well, what about me? I just thought about that idea of what does that have to do with our expectations, and do we need to get to 100% all the time? No,
Yeah,
but then how do we manage that gap?
yeah, you're absolutely right. And within organization, within companies, we talk about, do you need to be 100%? And a lot of times, trying to get 100% perfect is very, you're not going to make any progress. You're not going to get anything done, because
Yeah, sure.
it can be extremely difficult to get 100% perfect. And in terms of relationships, I've heard people say, well, as long as you have more good times than bad times, it's a good relationship, right? So all in how you define it. And look, I would never define a love relationship based on 100%. Do I love you 100%? 99? For me,
It would be an interesting discussion.
for me, I love my partner 100%, and I have my flaws, and we accept each other's flaws. But it's kind of trying to achieve that unconditional love. I think there's things that could happen in the relationship where I'd go, okay, it's going to be really difficult to love you now. But in terms of how much do I, how many of their attributes do I like? Okay, you could put that in a percentage. But do I, in terms of the intangibles, like I think putting numbers is really hard. So look, I'm not saying your way of looking at it is wrong. I was trying to think, could I put a number on it? And
Yeah. No, and I agree. You probably can. But it was an interesting idea.
yeah, absolutely. But you're right. I think it's a really important thing. Expectations is important, because if we set the bar too high, and I see people, or I've coached people who are perfectionists, and it's to their detriment, and they find a really hard time feeling a sense of success, feeling a sense of happiness, because they'll never achieve perfection, right? And I think that can be really discouraging. So I think your point is super valid about having the right expectations, and like.
Well, it's just regarding. I think you mentioned that you coached someone who defined success as being happy, and I'm not going to challenge that. But then, in terms of this number as well, so do you want to be 100% happy all the time, or what's the level of expectation? Right? If you can't be 100% happy all the time, you need to feel maybe a little bit more unhappy at points to feel more happy. I don't know, right?
Absolutely, I think.
But what's the general state that you want to be?
And again, happiness is not a destination. It's you find happiness in the moment, right? So, I love the way Thich Nhat Hanh talks about this in his various books and talks, and he also talks about every moment's an opportunity for a meditation, right? So every step you take, and so on, and the same sort of thing. Every moment offers us a chance for happiness, but it's not a constant, and it's not something that needs to be achieved constantly. And I think there's also real value in contrast. Those down moments we have. I mean, fear. For me, those moments of fear challenge us. Those moments of being discouraged. They bring out the determination in me. And those. I think our life is full of these contrasts and trade-offs, and I think that's what makes life so interesting. So yeah, the idea of constantly being happy, and I'm a big proponent of happiness. I think it's I have my whole theory about that, but I think happiness is important, and it's something that is like not to be set as a goal, but something to try and have as much of it in every day as possible. So yeah, the expectations piece is really, really important, and how you want to measure things, and always seeing that's kind of an attitude thing, right? Seeing the life is half full or half empty, right? So
yeah, I mean, mindsets play a really important role. Yeah, how do you choose to, or from what perspective or what kind of frame of mind do you choose to view the situation? That can bring a lot of happiness or non-happiness depending on what kind of paradigm you're setting, right?
Yeah.
So,
And, I could have said, having the growth mindsets really is super essential in my five ingredients.
mm,
But I think, for me, uh, it's kind of in the background already.
mm.
And being open minded is part of that growth mindset. For me, it's,
Yeah, I was gonna say curiosity, open-minded. Yeah,
yeah,
it could be related, I guess.
yeah, and I could have put in optimism, right? But for me, the determination piece is more important for me than the optimism, because I
Mm,
think my desire, my curiosity, my open mind, all of that, and even my clarity of purpose, they all create a degree of optimism in me. It's kind of a natural state for me, rather than just an ingredient. So yeah. Yeah. What about you? I've this whole time we've been talking about our definitions of success. I've shared my
mm.
core ingredients. I'd be interested to know if what comes, even if you haven't defined it uh, quite as much as I have, or maybe you have. But do you want to
Mm.
share some things that you would consider core ingredients to your success? Because you've been successful,
I
obviously.
Yeah, depends on how you define it. But sure, I'm content. I'm very content
Okay.
with where
Good.
I am. But yeah, it's I mean balance. It's about balance, very much about curiosity. But for me, balance is about the, as I said, the balance that I'm able to have a balance, well, between the different elements or the important elements or aspects of what I could consider important in my life, and that's a lot of things, so that can be a difficult equation at times, but in general, to have a balance there. And that means that sometimes I have to focus a lot on a certain thing, and then I might have an opportunity to focus more on others, but that gives me a good sort of balance and flexibility in my life that I really enjoy, and that's where I want to enjoy my life to the fullest with the different aspects of what's in there.
Hmm.
And that's a lot about my interests and things and people that I love, and a lot about curiosity, but also, yeah, learning. I'm very curious to learn new things and sort of, I guess, widen that palette.
Yeah.
But I think I realize more and more that and this is so, I mean, this will come back to anything, but for me to be able to feel successful, and there needs to be certain elements that has to be there, and it's really about being able to train physically, and sleep. To get enough sleep, and to be able to train. I enjoy working out and training, so that's also a hobby of mine. But I realize that if if I put it this way, I think last time, or maybe a few times ago, we talked about being able to put the big rocks in your bucket,
Hmm.
and then for sort of putting your big rocks in the bucket first, so you can fill in the rest of life there,
Hmm.
and those aspects has to be there, and that's really about sleep, family time, and physical effort. If that's there, then I have time to fill in all the other things. But if that's not there, it becomes unbalanced, and then I'm not gonna feel good. I'm not gonna be successful in the way that I think so. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I think the other thing, when I narrow things down to my sort of five ingredients, they're transferable, right? So you can say things like, determination, or for whatever, some people, discipline. Those things will help them be successful if they're training for something, some physical feat, or they'll be successful in their work life. But is discipline really the thing that makes for harmonious relationships? Um,
Mm,
or so I find these things are transferable, right? So, like, even in my relationship, being curious about if my partner would like certain things. Like, I love to cook, so I'm curious about, and so,
mm,
and again, also, how good can I get at cooking? How many, that there's a level of curiosity there, and also the desire to desire in terms of being my best or being able to provide the highest level of value, that's transferable within my relationships, within anything I do in the community or within clients that I have, coaching that I do. So if you see what I mean, and look, as a coach, if I didn't have an open mind as an ingredient to my success as coach, it would be very, very difficult, right? I wouldn't be able to coach a very wide range of people, and there'd be a very narrow amount of kind of solutions I would help them, help guide them towards. But so I think that's the other thing, is that having these things that can. Because there are plenty of things that if I want to be successful, if I want to be a successful writer, or if I want to be a successful, basketball player, right? There would probably be different ingredients in there, but these would definitely still need to be there, right? Even if you look at sports, if I look at basketball, the reason that the game continues to evolve, which I'm sure most sports continue to evolve, the reason it continues to evolve is because the coaches and trainers, they think about different ways to develop certain skills, and what if we, how else could we push the boundary of this sport and what you could do. I think curiosity plays a role in that, open-mindedness, and certainly a desire to continue to get better, right? So all of these ingredients I can plug them into the different areas that I want to, put into my definition of success. So,
yeah. And speaking of sports and sort of leaders and coaches that push the boundaries in there, I think this is, from that perspective, this is really important as well. Not only to think about yourself, but what about the people around you? I mean, as a leader, or as a parent, or as a good neighbor, or whatever, how do you create an environment where other people can be successful? And that of course, that's the sort of $1 million leadership question, right? But so how do you make other people successful? Because that will be your definition of success in most times, I guess. And there's not one tool that fits to each person. So finding out that, having that conversation, what works for you. And I'm not going to get too deep on this, but there's something. When we talk about feedback, there's also this aspect of feed forward, and there's something called a feed forward interview protocol, where you utilize and thinking about, well, what has been the circumstances that have made you successful in the past? Well, how can we create more of these kind of circumstances for you in the future? So instead of focusing on the performance that has been before, focusing on the conditions that will enable you to be successful in the future. And I think that's a really interesting and inspiring way of looking at things when it comes to creating success for others, in terms of, how can you develop, what do you need, what's your motivation, what do you aspire to do, what are the possibilities, and creating that sort of self-determined motivation that well, you mentioned Dan Pinky earlier before, that goes into that area. So maybe this is a different discussion, but helping others to find the ingredients for their success, I think that's a really interesting, perhaps another topic that we can talk about.
Well, I think it ties into how the question you asked when we first started the conversation: how do you define success? And I think if you want to help people be successful, it's really making sure that they're, making sure they're clear on, what the success means to them. And that definition can evolve over time. Certainly with more experience, you get more clear on that. And then, that, like I say, the list of whatever your core ingredients are is going to be very individual, and it shouldn't be an exhaustive list. I think I wouldn't limit it to, I only need these 5 things, right? And so it's I think there's having authenticity to it means it needs to be fairly individual. I don't think there's a template. I don't think there's a set of rules. I think the principle behind this is really, to find your own path, because we're all motivated by different things. We all find different things helpful to be our best or to achieve the things we want. And so I know there are things that we have in common, and science and people who look to optimize performance, they can tell you things that will fit for almost everybody. And that's fine. I think there are certain things about health and diet and physical fitness, and that you can definitely do that. I think from a psychological standpoint, there are also things that we all, everybody needs some love, and everybody, there are lots of things that are common to everyone. But if you do it that way, I think that you have a fairly long list. But if anything, it's even just about doing the exercise and going, these are the things that I know that I can see in all the different areas of my life have led to success. And it just gives you something to anchor with, and if you notice there's something missing when you're undertaking a project, or you're getting involved in a relationship, or whatever you're doing, is it, you can ask yourself, are these things driving me, or are these things the ingredients, or am I actually making choices out of fear, or am I actually, doing this just to please someone else, right? And so it just kind of helps. It's a bit of a compass for you to get your bearings. So at the very least, it does that for you. But at the very most, it really tells you the resources that you need, right? And when I encounter problems, and I forget about things that have made me successful in the past. I forget, actually, I've been here before. I know how to do this. The problem looks a little different, but I've done something like this before. And so I think these things help remind us of that. So again, rather than making it sort of a template or as rules or too structured, I think no, and even 5 is a very arbitrary number. Maybe you want to make it 6. You don't want to leave something off. But then again, if it's more than 10, then it's hard to keep track of what piece is missing, right? And it's the same reason that when we look at core values, people will have tons of values. They'll have 30, 40, 50 values that they think are important, but narrowing them down to a few, it just helps to orient yourself, right? To get your little inner compass sorted on what's important to you. So
yeah, I mean, there's a lot of different sort of tools that we can use to this, and I just thought of Benjamin Zander. He talked about give yourself an A, right? And I think that's a really lovely little exercise. So he asked the students to, okay, by the end of the semester, you're gonna get an A, but first you have to hand me a letter of how you got there. So give yourself an A, and then each student has to write a letter. Well, I deserve an A because during the semester I've been doing this and this and this and this. So they create a story of how much effort they put into it, the way learning, the way that they've been seeking feedback, etc., etc. And it becomes a list or their own path to success. I think that's a really, really lovely little exercise that you can utilize as well.
Absolutely, and at the end of the day, it's really creating some mental markers for yourself, or framing things in a certain way, and focusing your thoughts in a certain direction. And it's just about getting your psychology in a good spot in order to make the most of the situations you have, and the abilities, whatever abilities you were born with that you can build upon. So yeah, because look, at the end of the day, the thing that stops us the most, the biggest challenges we face, are usually ourselves. The habits we've developed, the negative thinking, or some of the beliefs that stand in our way. At the end of the day, those are the things that really challenge us the most, right? We create the problems in our relationships. We create a lot of the problems that we face day to day. Certainly, there are things out of our control, but a lot of the things that we that undermine our success and make us unhappy are things that are in our control. And I think exercises like this just help. Help you frame things and orient yourself in a way that helps you get on track and keep yourself on track. So,
Yeah, there's a long and winding but interesting road to success, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, maybe we want to wrap it up there. I
Yes.
think I think really, if I encourage people to just, as you said, define what success means to you, and then see if there's a few things that you, in all parts of your life, that have helped you be successful there, or if you don't feel like you've really achieved much success, here are the things I want to try doing consistently and see if they work. And then, but it's about experimentation, depending on the age or the where you are in life. But certainly if you've got a list of things that you do that continually don't lead you to the success or the life that you want, the quote that's often attributed to Einstein, the definition of insanity is, doing the same things over and over, and expecting a different result. And I don't think he actually said that, but it's often attributed to him. So anyway, so great. So look, Toby, thanks for engaging me on this topic.
Thanks for bringing it up.
I hope that it's been helpful and inspiring and at least thought-provoking for our listeners. So great. And we have another interesting topic coming up another couple of weeks. But until then, thanks for joining us. Thanks for listening. And I hope you find the ingredients to the success that you want in life. See you next time.
Thanks.
Cheers.
Bye.